Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to paint this EWAR City Road kit by Plastcraft Games. I was also planning to show a build of this kit, but lost the video for the assembly stage. Fortunately, it's very simple, so you're not really missing much at all there. These are 15 or 20mm scale roads, though I think they would be perfectly suitable for smaller roads in 28mm scale games like Bolt Action, and that's what I mostly intend to use these for. So we're going straight to the painting stage. My intention with this is to get these onto the gaming table as quickly and as easily as I can, using relatively cheap artist's paints and simple techniques. I primed these using a rattle can from the hardware store, specifically White Knight Paint and Prime Flat Black. As you can see, it's a little bit shiny. I'm not sure if that's due to the material these roads are made from, or maybe I applied the paint too heavily. I'm leaning towards it being the material. The paint dried very matte on the cardboard box I sprayed these on. I don't think it's really a big deal though for this kind of thing. I start off with Joe Sonia's Nimbus Grey, into which I mixed some carbon black. I quite like this brand of paint. They're relatively cheap and nicely fluid artist's acrylics, though you could use whichever brand you like and can find locally. Just don't go using your miniatures paints for a project like this. It could end up being quite costly. There's no specific ratio here. I'm just mixing it to a colour I like. You could of course just use a darker grey, but I didn't have one on hand. I mixed up a good amount of this so I would have enough of the same colour to paint every piece of the road consistently. Though of course the colours don't have to match perfectly for each piece. It's just road, and this is only the first layer, so don't worry too much about it. I simply brush it on like so. I'm not too worried about streaks, but I do brush the paint on along the road's direction of travel rather than across it. That way what streaks do show up should look a little bit more natural and realistic. Or at least that's my hope. If you want to be really fancy at this stage, you could pick out some of the individual paving stones in different shades of grey and brown to add some interest. But that would be rather time consuming and I want to do this quick. But I might do that were this a display piece. Next, as a kind of experiment, I diluted a tiny bit of the black with water. This is a very thin mix and I hoped it would work nicely as a wash, though I wasn't entirely sure if it would turn out okay. I liberally brush it on all over the piece. I want it to sit in all of the recesses like a wash should. It didn't work quite as well as I'd hoped. The result does look kind of dirty, which is good, but there's also some white scum-like stuff. That probably means I applied the wash too heavily. Oh well, no sense getting upset about it. I then decided to add a slightly darker grey colour to the roads. So I mixed that up. It's easy enough, just use a little bit more black than the last time. I brush it on, again in the direction that traffic would go in the hopes that it will make the road look a little bit more realistic. As you can see, I'm avoiding getting this on the footpath, though a little bit here and there is actually a good thing. There are obviously a few spots and streaks of the colour underneath this showing through. That's what I want. It will add variation and interest. You never see real roads that are one solid colour, so why would your model be that way? Next, I mix up a slightly lighter shade of grey and brush it onto the centre of the road. This is intended to create a worn look down the centre of the road. Depending on the scale you plan to use this with, you might want to add more, smaller lines of dry brushing here. These are intended to be single lanes, so I've only applied it down the centre. I also dry brushed the footpath fairly heavily with the same colour. I want the footpath to be a lighter colour overall. To help achieve that goal, I then applied a lighter dry brushing of the Nimbus Grey, focusing it only on the footpath. This is the result. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but you can see I've got a passable result using only 2 colours of paint. This would be perfectly usable for games, but I'm going to go a little bit further. But not too far. Even if you don't plan to go any further than that, it's a good idea to apply a protective coat to the model. I've used a brush on matte varnish I got from the art store. It's made the entire piece a little bit darker, which I think looks good, though it has resulted in more of a satin finish than matte. Probably because I applied it so thick to avoid doing too many coats. Still, it looks okay as it is. I wasn't 100% satisfied with the darkness in the gaps and recesses, so I made a wash using black artist's oil thinned with white spirits, all available from your local art supply for much cheaper than you would find in a miniatures store. It flows into the gaps much better than the water-based wash I tried before. This is some magical property of alcohol having less surface tension or something like that. I apply it to the road surface as well as the footpath. It looks a little bit patchy, which is good and should help the model look more realistic and natural. Not that roads are natural, but you know what I mean. The coat of varnish should protect the acrylic paints below from this. If you don't add a layer of varnish, you're in for a bad time. Then, because it was looking a little bit too clean, I decided to airbrush on some Vallejo Model Air Mud Brown. This is thinned roughly 1 part paint to 4 parts Vallejo airbrush thinner. I spray it very lightly randomly on the model. The idea is to create some subtle patches of dust and dirtiness. You could go way further than this with the weathering. You could add multiple colours of dust like this, or you could add mud or rubble or skid marks or anything you like, which would look cool, but it goes well beyond quickly and simply painting roads for the tabletop, doesn't it? I think what I have is just right for games like Bolt Action. To finish the project, I brushed on another couple of light coats of the Art Store matte varnish. They should protect the paint well enough, but it wasn't dull enough for my liking, so I lightly hit it with some AK Interactive Ultra Matte, just enough to kill most of the shine. And that's it. Plastcraft Games' EWAR City Road set painted up quickly and easily. Hopefully this demonstrates that it's not especially hard or time-consuming to achieve some acceptable results, even if you don't want to go so far as to airbrush the brown on or use an oil-based wash. All you need is a few simple paints and a small amount of time. I actually spent more time waiting for the varnish to dry than actually painting these roads. Here's a few images of how they might look on the gaming table. I'm pretty happy with the result I got here. It's obviously not a hyper-detailed display piece by any stretch of the imagination, and it's not intended as such. It's a gaming piece used to represent roads so your tanks can go faster, and these will fill that role admirably. The methods I've used in this video are what I would consider very simple, and I'm sure nobody will have any real problem putting them to use on their own roads and similar terrain items. That said, if you have any questions, do feel free to ask them. And of course, don't forget to do things like subscribing here on YouTube and following me on social media. Check the links in the description to find me. If you really like the things I do, please consider helping to support the channel over at Patreon. Patrons get to see my videos a little bit early, along with some patron-only bonus content, and of course access to the patron-only Discord channel. I shall return soon, so until then, happy modelling and thanks for watching. Farewell.